Imagine a man who was so incredibly good at playing the stock market that he was widely considered the greatest trader who ever lived. His name was Jesse Livermore. Born in 1877, he ran away from home as a teenager with only $5 in his pocket. But Jesse possessed a mathematical mind like no other. By the time he was in his 20s, he was making so much money on Wall Street that people called him the boy plunger. He didn't just invest, he speculated with extreme, ice-cold precision. During the catastrophic San Francisco earthquake of 1906, he made a fortune by predicting the market's reaction. In the panic of 1907, he made $3 million in a single day, prompting the legendary banker J.P. Morgan to personally beg him to stop shorting the market to save the American economy. Jesse lived like a king. He owned massive mansions around the world, had a fleet of luxury yachts, rode in private railway cars, and was surrounded by elite high society. He was an absolute financial wizard who understood the numbers better than anyone else alive. Now, let us fast forward to the year 1929, the year of the Great Crash, the worst financial disaster in modern history. As the stock market began to collapse, destroying the lives of millions of families and sending Wall Street into utter chaos, Jesse Livermore saw his ultimate opportunity. While other traders were jumping out of windows in despair, Jesse spent days locked in his private office, executing a massive, high-risk strategy. When he finally returned home to his family, his wife was in tears, terrified that they were ruined. Jesse calmly looked at her and smiled. He had just made over $100 million in a single day. In today's money, that is worth well over $1.5 billion. He had literally beaten the entire world economy. He was untouchable, a god of finance who had mastered the rules of money. But now, look at the second person in our story. Her name was Grace Groner. She was born in 1909, during the exact era when Jesse Livermore was ruling Wall Street. Grace's life started with tragedy. She was orphaned at the age of 12 and had to be taken in by a kind local family in a small town in Illinois. She never went to an elite university. She never studied finance, never looked at complex trading charts, and never stepped foot on Wall Street. Instead, she got a humble job as a secretary at a local pharmaceutical company called Abbott Laboratories. She worked there for 43 long years. Grace lived in a tiny, one-bedroom cottage that was gifted to her by a friend. She walked everywhere because she refused to buy a car. She bought her clothes at local garage sales and grew her own vegetables in her backyard. To everyone who knew her, Grace was just a sweet, quiet, elderly lady who lived a very simple, almost impoverished life. If you had to predict the future of these two individuals, you would naturally assume that the genius Jesse Livermore would build a generational dynasty of wealth, while the quiet secretary Grace Groner would barely get by. But the psychology of money has a way of completely rewriting human expectations. Let us return to the financial titan, Jesse Livermore. Shortly after his massive triumph in 1929, Jesse's ego took complete control of his mind. He believed he was completely invincible. Because he had successfully predicted the crash, he convinced himself that he could never make a mistake again. He began taking even larger, more aggressive risks, borrowing massive amounts of money to fund his trades. But the market is a chaotic beast that cannot be tamed by ego. Over the next few years, Jesse made a series of terrible, highly leveraged bets. He ignored his own rules, let his pride guide his decisions, and refused to accept that he was wrong. By 1934, just 5 years after making $100 million, Jesse Livermore was completely, utterly bankrupt. He lost his mansions, his yachts, and his reputation. In 1940, overwhelmed by the crushing weight of shame, regret, and a broken spirit, the greatest trader in the world walked into a cloakroom of a New York hotel and tragically ended his own life. He had all the financial knowledge in the world, yet he died with a negative net worth. Meanwhile, what was happening in the quiet world of Grace Groner?
In 1935, shortly after Jesse Livermore went bankrupt, Grace made a very simple decision. She took $180, which was a significant amount of money for a secretary back then, and bought 3 shares of stock in the company she worked for, Abbott Laboratories. She didn't buy them to trade them. She didn't check the daily stock price, she didn't read financial news, and she didn't panic when the market went through recessions. She simply held on to those 3 shares. Whenever the company paid her a dividend, she didn't spend the money on luxury items or a new wardrobe. Instead, she used those small dividend payments to buy a fraction of another share. She repeated this incredibly boring, simple process for 75 years. In 2010, Grace Groner passed away peacefully at the ripe old age of 100. When her lawyers opened her estate, the entire community of Lake Forest, Illinois was left in absolute shock. The quiet, humble secretary who walked to the grocery store and wore secondhand clothes had secretly accumulated a mind-blowing fortune of over $7 million. She didn't have any children, so in her will, she left every single cent of her $7 million fortune to a local college foundation to fund scholarships for future generations. How could a secretary with a basic salary completely outperform and outlive the most celebrated professional trader in history? The answer lies in a profound psychological truth. Doing well with money is not a science. It is a behavioral art. Jesse Livermore was a genius of intellect, but a victim of his own emotions. He possessed the cognitive ability to make millions, but lacked the behavioral discipline of knowing when he had enough. His greed, fueled by his massive ego, ultimately destroyed him. Grace Groner, on the other hand, possessed zero financial training, but she had mastered the most important financial skill of all: patience and emotional stability. She understood that wealth is not created by outsmarting the market in a single day, but by allowing time, discipline, and compound interest to work their magic over decades. This story teaches us that your relationship with money is a reflection of your character. The stock market is not a casino designed for the smartest people in the room. It is a mirror that reflects your deepest flaws, your greed, your impatience, and your vanity. If you cannot control your ego, no amount of money will ever be enough to save you from ruin. But if you can master your behavior, live simply, and practice relentless patience, even a humble secretary can build an empire that outlasts the titans of Wall Street. So ask yourself today, are you constantly chasing the quick, high-risk wins of Jesse Livermore, trying to prove how smart you are to the world? Or do you have the quiet, stoic wisdom of Grace Groner, understanding that true financial freedom is built in silence, one disciplined decision at a time? Which legacy are you building?